Well-designed cities tend to have really good connections, so the idea that you can have a bunch of developments that are in separate locations all well and truly integrated together. And I guess our riverbank is a good example of that. We've got the Adelaide Oval development, the casino, looking at spending some money, the convention centre, and now we're having a master plan process put in place that actually looks at linking all those things together. So what will happen when 50,000 people leave the Adelaide Oval? Where do they go for a drink afterwards? What do they do? How do we keep them in the precinct? Design tackles those really big picture ideas in terms of linking things together. It might also look at perhaps the health benefits that you get from doing a more higher density urban development like the Bowden site, for example. The idea that if you can get people out walking, cycling, rather than being car dependent, there's potentially an impact on the health budget and the spend that we do in 10 years' time in terms of people's health because they're exercising more. So it's a really broad thing. It also gets down to, just the creation of beautiful spaces, beautiful buildings, and just how they sit within the city fabric. And I think Adelaide has an abundance of those that are from a previous era, which we've been very fortunate to keep. What we now need to look at is how we actually create the heritage of today for our future generations. I think it's important to go broad before you drop down into the detail of an individual project. So again, it gets back to that idea of if you're doing a major development, look well beyond the development and how it connects into other places, how people get to it, what their experience might be on the way of coming to it. And then you start looking at the detail and actually planning out the individual components of the project themselves. So, for example, with the zoo, one of the key things that we did was look at how we might offer space back to the parklands rather than it just being a building that's an entrance into the zoo precinct itself. We looked at how people move into the space, we looked at how it relates to the Botanic Gardens, and we've ended up with that wonderful forecourt plaza that's effectively a contribution back to the parklands, which I think was a pretty bold move on behalf of the zoo to accept something like that. I'd like to think it's changing. I think there's some work to do at the moment. I think it's too much couched in an winners and losers approach, or an us and them, rather than what are the benefits for us as a society. So I don't think we're really good at engaging in a broad discussion around the benefits and the negatives that potentially come with development. We tend to gravitate into corners and then try and slug it out, if you like, rather than really getting in behind the reasons for doing something and talking about in some detail and debating as well the benefits that it might bring. It tends to be very polarised type debate. And I think we've got to get a lot more sophisticated in the way that we do talk about these things, because I think we're missing opportunities, potentially, in the way that developments take their course. And something that may be a strong idea ends up being watered down. But it's really important that it isn't about winners and losers. We need to look at how we can all actually get the best out of this. One of the best things about Adelaide is just the ease of moving around and the proximity of some great places that we've got really close in. And I think that's really important to try and preserve that. You've got the beach, you can get to that in 20 minutes, you can get to the hills in 20 minutes, great wine regions to the north and the south. And just the reasonably laid back approach that we have to things. And I think that's something worth preserving. That doesn't mean to say that we can't, in defined and discrete pockets, actually look at really developing up some areas. Take the city, for example, the square mile. We could easily up the densities and the population in the city to 50,000 people and create something that's a unique, vibrant precinct, people living in the area, working in the area. I remember a couple of years ago I had a colleague from our Bangkok office come to visit, and we had an afternoon to spend. He wanted to see Adelaide, and we thought, where do we go? We did a bit of a wander around the city because we couldn't necessarily go out to the hills or to the beach or anything like that. And as we walked through the mall, we effectively walked on to North Terrace, and he just said, wow, this is fantastic. The area between Frome Road and King William Road, so the University, State Library, Museum, Art Gallery, that cultural precinct, he was blown away by it. And it was really interesting to have an outsider's perspective on what we probably take for granted here. A lot of focus on central Adelaide, on the square mile, because of the great amenity that it has already in the parklands. I think Light left us a wonderful legacy with the structure of Adelaide, parklands, squares, great public outdoor spaces that a lot of cities around the world would absolutely kill for. But really being able to use them well means that we build up the density in central Adelaide. I almost feel as if we've got a jigsaw puzzle and there's been a few pieces missing for a number of years. So it's not as if we're talking about throwing the jigsaw out and creating a new one. It's just putting in those last few bits and pieces in the middle, and then we have a city that really, really works well. So that's what I'd love to see, is that central Adelaide becoming that vibrant space that people can come to if they wish to, if that's what they want to, if that's how they want to live. And there are people out there who do cherish that sort of thing, which is why a lot of people go overseas to effectively sample that, or move interstate to Melbourne and Sydney. So by filling in that piece of the puzzle, I think we've suddenly got a city that works really well and will become attractive, will keep people here, design sensibility will be better, it just become a really, really good place to live.